So I can start to feel as though I am just crazy, as though my emotions just make no sense. Because I might be aware of the fact that from the outside, someone could look at my life and go, well, if you're struggling with these things, with, let's say, overeating or drinking too much, or being really rigid or obsessive about something, why don't you just stop doing that? And because I don't know why I'm doing those things in the first place, I might start to feel like, well, I just have these character defects. I just have these compulsions I don't understand. When in reality, we just don't know how to regulate around our core emotions because we don't have access to them because they have become shame-bound. But by this point, where we have shame regulation strategies that are leading to more shame, probably what we're doing is self-isolating quite a bit. So we're cutting ourselves off from co-regulation because we're telling ourselves the story, my emotions don't make any sense to me or to other people. So if I tried to show people what was up for me, I would probably just get shamed even further for the fact that my behavior makes no sense. And I might get labeled as things like lazy or weak or whatever it is, and that would just lead to more shame. So this is the point in the cycle where shame becomes extremely maladaptive because it's no longer functioning to keep our authentic selves in connection with other people. The only way at this point to stay in connection with other people is to develop a false self. So a social persona where you pretend for short periods of time to be a perfectly regular, perfectly regulated person. And then when dysregulation comes online, instead of staying present in your connections and working through that dysregulation directly by working things out with the other person or by doing self-regulation strategies, you withdraw and turn to your maladaptive coping mechanisms because that's the only way you know how to deal with dysregulation. Because again, you don't have the language for what's actually going on. So one problem you're chronically dealing with is the fact that you're dysregulated because the emotions you don't have an awareness of don't get dealt with and live on inside of you and dysregulate your system. But another problem is that your life stops making a lot of sense and it gets really hard to make wise decisions for yourself because the shame-bound emotions, the ones that you have learned to either push down or misidentify, were actually there to give you really important pieces of information. And you are missing those pieces of information if you're not able to be consciously aware of those feelings. Ergo, you're going to really struggle with making decisions in a way that makes sense. So an example of this, let's say I have a shame bind around anger. As soon as I feel anger, my system pushes it right down and tells me something like, now it's time to feel guilty or to fawn. Now what might happen is I might find myself in a pattern of relationships where I am being spoken down to or treated very poorly. But anytime anger tries to come up, gets pushed down, and I go into an appeasement response with my partner. And I might be absolutely baffled at why I keep ending up in unhealthy relationship after unhealthy relationship. And the fact that I can't seem to identify these warning signs or notice in the moment when things are going awry might become another source of shame. I might know that from the outside, it looks like I just can't figure this out. I just cannot seem to find healthy partners or end up in healthy relationships. And again, I might internalize that as a character flaw. There must just be something wrong with me. I let people walk all over me. When in reality, I'm just not in touch with the anger that is there to inform me of the fact that my boundaries are being crossed. That anger is really important for discernment when it comes to choosing partners and navigating relationships. Or let's say my system immediately comes and hops on joy or excitement when I feel it and pushes it down because I internalize that as if I am excited and sharing it with people, I am being annoying and disruptive. Now, I might start feeling chronically depressed and not understanding why I can't motivate myself to just get up, figure out what I want out of my life, and go for it. Because that emotion of excitement or lust or that moving towards energy has been shame-bound for me. So I'm unable to take signals from my own body about how to motivate myself and which direction to move towards. And again, I might just internalize something like, well, I'm just a lazy piece of crap. I just don't try hard enough. I just can't seem to motivate myself like other people can because there's something wrong with me. And those stories about ourselves, once again, can lead to withdrawing and to pulling away from any forms of co-regulation. Because we believe that if we showed ourselves to someone else, they would just go, well, why don't you just do the obvious thing? Just get up in the morning and do something. Or just get out of that relationship and find a better partner. We can often see the patterns that we're stuck in, but not what led us into those patterns and what would have to change in a given moment when a pattern is playing out in order for us to put a stop to it and pivot in a new direction. So again, we start to tell ourselves an untrue story about our inherently flawed nature. That story causes us to isolate further, and the more we isolate and the more we don't allow ourselves to be seen and to co-regulate with other people, the more we need comfort, the more we need connection, and the more we turn right back to those same maladaptive coping mechanisms in order to soothe ourselves in the absence of interpersonal comfort and true, deep co-regulation. So this is where we end up in a really toxic loop, where we might have no idea how to make the changes we need to make in our lives because the core emotions that we would need access to in order to get out of this loop are inaccessible to us. And the way that we start to reverse this cycle is we learn to get back in touch with those core emotions. And in order to do that, we probably need to work with what Alice Miller, who is a famous late psychologist, would call an enlightened witness. So an enlightened witness is someone like a therapist, an author, friend who's been through the rounds of their own toxic shame, who's able to give you the type of language for your experiences that you have lacked your entire life.